I could not have allowed this to end otherwise.
What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we're going to be checking out the entire first wave of Transformers Wild King figures released exclusively by Takara Tomy. These are based on an all-new Japanese Transformers cartoon, which sees the Autobots and Decepticons battle it out over elemental beings known as the Energy Beasts. And I've got to say that it's a concept that I found to not only be incredibly interesting, but also one that reminded me a lot of Transformers Energon, only this time with the introduction of Beast-like characters. Not to mention that these also look so much better in comparison than anything so far shown off for Hasbro's upcoming Transformers Cyberworld toy line. So, up first are both Optimus Prime and Megatron, which in this universe I believe are known as Energy Masters, and they look exactly how you'd expect them to, both super inspired by their looks in the original G1 cartoon. Now, I know some of you may be thinking that these do look to be pretty simplistic, especially for two figures that do retail for roughly around the price point of a Voyager, and that's because in Japan these are actually aimed at a slightly younger audience. But the main reason why I decided to take a look at them is because despite that, there is still so much here for older fans to enjoy. I mean, you've only got to take a look at some of the crap that Hasbro's been putting out for the Transformers Earthspark toy line. Back during the height of the live-action movie, something like the Revenge of the Fallen Optimus Prime was considered as a toy made for younger fans. And these I really do think are kind of the perfect balance between both simplicity and enjoyability. Still not perfect, but definitely much better. Take Megatron for example. He's big, bulky, yet still pretty decently detailed and won't look too out of place stacked up alongside some of your Generations figures. Not to mention that the plastic used is dense, like this guy feels super thick, and with the exception of the back of the arms being hollow, visually this guy is completely filled in. Optimus Prime on the other hand, whilst is still fairly decent, I definitely think is the weaker between the two. Not only visually, but he also just doesn't feel as good in hand, which is honestly kind of surprising considering that he is the show's main character. But turning to one of the big gimmicks with this toy line, both Optimus Prime and Megatron are somewhat modular in their design. So for example, if you wanted to, you could totally mix and match their limbs to almost create a Skybound inspired Optimus Prime, with him being fully weaponized up with Megatron's fusion cannon. Which leads me on to accessories. Up first, Optimus includes an Energon battle axe, additional armor for the combined mode, and then finally, I guess a pair of shoulder pads. The axe when in robot mode can be combined along with the armor to create for a pretty cool look, or can even be used separately to armor Optimus up. Whereas, when it comes down to Megatron, he includes his iconic G1-inspired fusion cannon, and yet another piece of armor for the head, which does look strikingly similar to his design from the Transformers Armada TV show. Now turning to the Energy Beasts, these were by far the figures that I was the most excited for, just as they reminded me a lot of the fossilizers from the Transformers Kingdom line, but I'd say are actually slightly more similar to the Rock Lords from Legacy United, as they don't really break apart all that much. These guys are elemental creatures, which have the ability to armor up either Optimus or Megatron with their own unique abilities, and are kinda like Scramble City combiners in the way they've been designed, as they can transform into either an arm or a leg. The first wave consists of Captain Volca, Leafback, Lightlong, and Hydrophant, which despite all sharing the same core skeleton, actually feature their own unique characteristics to really help differentiate them from each other. I think for myself, Leafback has to easily be the best looking when in robot mode. The head sculpt looks sick, and if anything is kinda similar to the upcoming Megatron design from Transformers Cyberworld. My least favourite looking though would have to be Lightlong. As the name would suggest, his arms are massive, which I guess is kind of accurate to how he does appear on the show, as it's basically one big commercial for the toys, as the CG designs look exactly like the figures. Hydrophant also has a banging head sculpt. This guy's unique ability is Aqua Energy, so I think it's really cool how his head design kind of resembles a Japanese firefighter. I also really like how Captain Volca stores the arms from his Dino modes onto his forearms to act as inbuilt weaponry for him to use to slice and dice his opponents with. In terms of accessories though, in addition to each of them including their own handheld weapon, they also include their own unique elemental energy that can be combined along with the matrix of combination of both Optimus Prime and Megatron. Turning to posability, when it comes down to the Energy Masters, I'd say these here are quite comparable to an old school deluxe, but are definitely much better in comparison to some of the figures from Hasbro's gimmicky lines. So to begin with, the head is on a ball joint. This can look up, down, and can rotate left to right. The shoulders can kick forwards and backwards, as well as all the way out to the side. The biceps can spin, with the elbows being able to bend to 90. Surprisingly, even their fists can rotate, and the same can also be said for the waist joint. The hips can kick forwards, backwards, as well as all the way out to the side, which is a first in a long time for a gimmicky figure. The knees can bend to 90, although unfortunately both of them are lacking an ankle joint, which I really think is something they maybe could have implemented. As for the Energy Beasts, these are almost like a cross between an old Scout from Revenge of the Fallen and a recent core class. So up first, all 4 of their heads are fixed into place, which is mainly due to the transformation, but again, much like the lack of ankles on some of the larger figures, I do think this is something which maybe they could have integrated. The shoulders though are on ball joints, so these can kick forwards, backwards, and out to the side. Their biceps can spin, and their elbows can bend to 90, although unfortunately all 4 are again lacking wrist rotation. But surprisingly, the same cannot be said for the waist joint. Their hips can kick forwards, backwards, as well as again all the way out to the side. They are even packing thigh rotation, which I thought was really cool. Proper working knee joints that can bend way past 90. And then finally, in the case of only 2 of them, the toes can rock downwards.
Transform and roll out.
So, starting off firstly with Optimus Prime, take the head and fold this downwards, and then rotate all the way around at the waist joint. The shoulders will then fold backwards and will snap into the backpack, with the elbows being bent to 90. And as a throwback to the original G1 cartoon, the forearms will create the sides of the truck. The legs are incredibly simple, as these only combine, and then will slide backwards to merge along with the front ends of the truck. And that right there, guys, is pretty much the base transformation, although you can make this look slightly better if you do decide to combine him along with his accessories. Now as for Megatron, again, you're going to want to take a hold of the head sculpt and slide this downwards. You'll then take the fists and spin these all the way around until the back now faces the front, and then you'll take the bicep and spin this around. Once completed, we can then take a hold of the fusion cannon and attach it into the side of the arm, as we are now going to take the shoulders and slide these backwards, so that we can then combine everything directly down the middle. Once completed, we can now rotate inwards at the thigh, spin around at the hip joint and bend downwards at the knee, as we are now going to take this panel and pop it open, so that we can then take this part of the tank, hinge it upwards, and then take this panel and snap it back into place. We can now hinge downwards at the hip and attach the leg into what was originally the chest plate.
One shall stand, and one shall fall.
Here are both Optimus Prime and Megatron fully transformed into their vehicle modes. Honestly, we're not going to spend too much time discussing the alt modes, as they are easily the weaker between their 2 forms. As you would expect, Prime transforms into a truck and Megatron a tank. At least in the case of Optimus Prime, he is packing some pretty sweet pinned on wheels, whereas Megatron is pretty much just a static brick. So yeah, definitely not the greatest, but again, these are intended for a slightly younger audience. Switching to the transformation for the Energy Beasts, as the core skeleton between all 4 is the same, so is pretty much the transformation. So for step number 1, take the head and slide it backwards, so that you can then slide forwards at the neck joint. Once completed, we can then snap this back into its original position. You'll then take the shoulders and hinge these backwards, so that we can then rotate outwards at the bicep, and these will combine directly down the middle, and the same can also be said for the legs. Once that's completed, we can now take the waist joint and spin this all the way around until the back now faces the front. You'll then take the front part of the foot and slide this backwards, so that we can then take this entire section and slide this downwards until it does click into place. You'll then make use out the hip joints and slide these down, and at this point we can now whack on the accessories from the robot mode to complete the look of the beast mode. The Energy Beasts, on the other hand, all mostly look fantastic, and it really surprised me just how different they are visually, despite more or less transforming exactly the same. Captain Volca transforms into a mechanical T-Rex, which is a pretty nice throwback to Beast Wars Megatron. Leafback is a Triceratops, and I think has one of the nicest looking beast modes out of them all. Hydrophant is a robotic elephant, which even has blast effect compatible tusks, allowing him the ability to light up the enemy on the battlefield. And then finally, Lightlong transforms into a f***ing giraffe. But the main purpose of the Energy Beasts is to be combined along with the Energy Masters, and is easily the biggest selling point of these guys. So for the first step, take the chest plate, hinge this downwards to expose the matrix of combination. We can then take the forearms and pop these clean off, with the same also applying for the lower legs. Something which I thought was super cool is how you can then take the forearm and store this inside the leg, so that you don't have any additional parts just kind of hanging about. And as for the energy beasts, it's the same deal as before, as all of them transform exactly the same. For the first step, take the legs and combine these directly down the middle, with the entire head sliding backwards, and snap the backpack back into place. The shoulders will slide backwards, with the forearms rotating outwards, and these will combine directly down the middle. The legs will then slide backwards until they do snap into place, and that is again the base transformation now fully complete. And here is Optimus Prime fully combined along with all of the energy beasts from Wave 1, and I think looking pretty cool. Sure, by the standards set by Age of the Primes or even the Studio Series line, this guy does look kinda funky. But as far as the gimmick goes, that's mainly intended for someone slightly younger, I actually found to get a lot of enjoyment out of this one myself. And again, I really think the whole concept is kind of inspired by the Unicron trilogy, in the sense that the energy beasts give their wielder unique elemental abilities, which is kinda similar to the Minicons. I also really like the versatility of these guys. Either one can be used as either an arm or a leg, and if you really wanted to, you could even mix and match the parts between all four. They also attach in exactly the same way for Megatron, so if you wanted him fully armoured up taking out Optimus Prime, then that is totally a look that you can pull off. And I think it's about to get even crazier with the release of Wave 2, as there's a character known as Thunderbeak which transforms into a Pteranodon and can even create a jetpack for the combined mode, which I think it's safe to say is gonna look wild. Now as for my only very minor complaint, I do find that the legs in particular have a tendency to detach a little easier than I'd like. Now whilst it's not so much of an issue if you only plan to display these guys, as they have been designed with a slightly younger audience in mind, I can imagine that it'll become a little frustrating for the limbs to just pop off every now and again. But this is still miles better than anything Hasbro has released as part of their main line, especially by the looks of the upcoming Cyberworld toy line. So, wrapping up on this review for the Transformers Wild King toy line, I've got to be completely honest and say that these are just fun. They are exactly what you would hope from a Transformers main line aimed at a slightly younger audience. The detailing throughout I think is actually really well done, especially in the case of the energy beasts. These are such a fantastic idea, and giving them the ability to not only transform into their individual modes, but to also combine along with some of the larger energy masters, I think makes them incredibly versatile. And this is exactly what I would hope to see adapted for a future Hasbro toy line, because if the state of modern retail is anything to go by, then their gimmicky toys just aren't selling. I would love to get your guys' thoughts down below. As always, I thank you all so much for watching, and until my next video, I'll see you then. Transform and roll out!